erupting in New York and across the country. The grand jury decides not to indict a white police officer.
We are marching against wrong.
The police here have shut off the Henry Hudson.
This was an arrest for an extremely minor crime.
He shouldn't have been killed in that way.
We see a man dying on video and there's no indictment. How frustrated do people feel?
Can you imagine if we didn't have this video, what their story would be?
This is an issue that we've been dealing with for too long, and it's time for us to make more progress than we've made.
All lives must be valued. All lives.
Yeah, we want you to rally, but rally in peace. I'm determined to get justice for my husband.
Good morning. Welcome to New Day. It's Thursday, December 4th, just about 8 o'clock in the East. Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata here. The violence was largely absent, but the anger has returned in full force after a white New York City cop was cleared in the chokehold death of an unarmed black man. The grand jury deciding not to indict Officer Daniel Pantaleo, who was caught on tape choking Eric Garner to death. And look, show the division. Here are the papers this morning, all right? One city, two tabloids, two different takes on this. One says it was not a crime,
and the other says we can't breathe, which has become the rallying cry for the protesters. Just like Hands Up, Don't Shoot was in Ferguson, now they say we can't breathe because they're representing Eric Garner's voice. So two completely different perspectives, and it's reflected on social media this morning. People who are tweeting us and on Facebook say when the police approach you, you must comply. That's half of the comments.
In the streets, too. This is New York City. One of the things that made it different was the protesters were hearing from people on the street, offering exactly that perspective, some of them.
Well, with 83 arrests and demonstrations last night around the country, an outraged Attorney General Eric Holder promises a thorough and independent probe into Eric Garner's death. Meanwhile, Garner's family is slamming the decision, vowing that the fight in the case has just begun. So before we get to our coverage, we're also monitoring, we should let you know, NASA's test flight of the Orion spacecraft. The launch has been delayed several times this morning already because of high winds. We will bring it to you live when that does happen. But back to our top story. We will talk with Garner's family attorney in just a moment, but our coverage begins with Jason Carroll. He is live in Times Square. Jason.
Well, Allison, as you know, they marched, they chanted. Some of the protesters coming out here last night saying the same thing that Eric Garner's wife said, that they would fight until the end for justice. Protesters pouring into the streets of New York last night after a grand jury did not indict New York City police officer Daniel Pantaleo in the chokehold death of 43-year-old Eric Garner.
It's a very painful day for so many New Yorkers.
Arrests made throughout the night as outrage pulsed throughout the city streets for more than 9 hours. Most chanting Garner's last words before dying on this Staten Island street. Police summoned riot gear blocking intersections as protesters began shutting down the city's most iconic landmarks. Stopping the flow of traffic into and out of the island of Manhattan for hours. Some lying down right in the middle of the road, the same inside Grand Central Station, I can't breathe. Where other protesters staged a massive die-in as evening rush hour hit its peak. Police heavily guarding the Rockefeller tree lighting ceremony as protesters try to disrupt the show. The city's public outcry reaching a fever pitch nationwide. These two cops have got to go! From Los Angeles,
I am Eric Garner!
I am Eric Garner! To Philadelphia, where protesters took to City Hall during their tree lighting ceremony, holding up signs reading Black Lives Matter. The demonstrations across the country disruptive but peaceful, fulfilling Garner's family wish.
Yeah, we want you to rally, but rally in peace.
No violence. That's all I ask.
Officer Pantaleo said in a statement, "It is never my intention to harm anyone, and I feel very bad about the death of Mr. Garner." But Garner's wife says it's too late.
Hell no. The time for remorse would have been when my husband was yelling to breathe. That would have been the time for him to show some type of remorse or some type of care for another human being's life.
New York City's mayor also releasing a statement this morning saying this is not the end of the Eric Garner story, only the end of a chapter. Allison.
All right, Jason Carroll, thank you. President Obama saying the incident and grand jury decision demonstrates the disconnect between minorities and law enforcement. Let's get right to senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta for more on the reaction from the White House. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Allison. In a rapid response to the Eric Garner case, President Obama once again promised changes to the criminal justice system. But after Ferguson and now New York City, the White House knows all too well patience is wearing thin. Sensing a crisis that is growing, President Obama waited just a few hours to weigh in after the decision was announced not to indict a New York City police officer in the chokehold death of Eric Garner.
When anybody in this country is not being treated equally under the law, that's a problem.
With emotions already raw across the country after the unrest in Ferguson, the president tried to strike a balance, recognizing the important work of law enforcement while insisting the justice system must change.
I'm not interested in talk, I'm interested in action, and I am absolutely committed as President of the United States to making sure that we have a country in which everybody believes in the core principle that we are equal under the law.
Attorney General Eric Holder, who will be visiting 5 more U.S. cities to meet with civil rights leaders on the issue, said the Justice Department is investigating the Garner case.
All lives must be valued. All lives.
Adding more pressure on the administration, the U.S. attorney overseeing the chokehold investigation also happens to be the woman tapped to replace Holder, Loretta Lynch.
Our prosecutors will conduct an independent, thorough, fair, and expeditious investigation.
On Capitol Hill, members of the Congressional Black Caucus are insisting the president cannot tackle the problem alone.
I do hope that the Department of Justice gives Americans an opportunity to take this cancer and cut it out once and for all.
On the streets of the nation's capital, there was a different kind of gridlock as protesters snarled traffic to send a message.
I'm sorry these people over here are inconvenienced, but it's inconvenient to get shot in the street. It's inconvenient to get choked on videotape. It's inconvenient to have no justice.
And President Obama says he wants to start rebuilding trust in law enforcement and in minority communities quickly. That's why he's calling on his new 21st Century Policing Task Force, which was just launched on Monday, to issue its recommendations within 90 days. Chris?
All right, Jim, thank you very much. Eric Garner's widow, Esau Garner, just told NBC's Today Show how she felt when she found out that the officer who choked her husband to death was not indicted. Here it is.
And I started crying because it's not fair. It's not fair. What do they not see? How could they possibly not indict? You know, I felt hopeless. I felt like there was not another corner to turn, like there was nothing left for me to fight for.
All right, let's bring in Jonathan Moore. He is an attorney for the Garner family. Counsel, thank you for joining us this morning. And we get a little glimpse of the widow a couple different times here in the last couple of days. But how is the family doing? Because the only reality that's undebatable here is that the husband and father is gone.
Right, no, they're struggling. It's been a difficult 4 months since he was killed and living with the uncertainty. And then I think we expected that there would be some legal action going forward by the grand jury that would be positive.
It was a surprise.
It was a surprise, I think. I suppose we shouldn't be shocked about these things after a history of this, but it was still a surprise. I mean, I think the video was pretty strong in terms of showing really violent police conduct. As I think the New York Times in the editorial section, we referred to it today as vicious policing.
Do you believe, and does the family believe, that Officer Pantaleo was trying to kill Eric Garner?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think that's the issue, and that really isn't the issue, whether he was really had evil in his heart. He clearly was violating his own departmental regulations. He clearly was using excessive force. you have to understand, this whole thing was about a suspected, essentially, administrative code violation of selling untaxed cigarettes. Not even seeing it, just suspecting it. And that's normally just a summonsable offense. You give somebody a ticket and they show up in court. I don't understand why they wanted to be so aggressive. It's that aggressive policing, which is, he clearly was involved in that, is what led to the actions here.
Is a possible explanation for that, though, that whatever the underlying offense was, no matter how minor, trivial, and unusually policed, once they say, we're going to arrest you, and Mr. Garner says, no, essentially, I'm not going to let you arrest me, now you have a very different dynamic with police, and no matter what the underlying offense is. Isn't that true?
Well, it's true and it's not true. I don't think there was ever a clear direction in that video that we're going to arrest you, that you're under arrest. In fact, if you watch it closely, what you see is Mr. Garner being frustrated because there had been a pattern of him being... You've
been arrested, what, 31 times?
Some large amount of time, you know, for a guy just trying to make a living. And you can criticize the way he was making a living, that's fine, but he was a family man, married for 27 years, raised kids, had grandkids. This was how he made a living.
The pushback is that don't fail to comply with police instructions and you don't get excessive force used on you. Is that a fair analysis?
No, that's not a fair analysis. The pushback is if you raise an objection to what you believe to be unnecessary, unlawful police conduct, you get a very aggressive response. Right. He's saying, this is not right. In fact, his hands are up and he's saying, really, you got to not do this. And then that's when Pantaleo
grabs him from
behind and takes him down with a chokehold.
The officer testified, and he said he was trying to protect him. He thought he was going to bang into the window. He wanted to make sure he didn't hurt the other officers and that he wasn't hurt himself. Do you buy that?
No, I don't. I don't see in that video an officer being concerned about the safety of Eric Garner. What I see is a very aggressive takedown of somebody unnecessarily and with the maximum use of force. You see it in the way he was pressing his head against the ground. That was just unnecessary, and the failure to respond to the fact that he's saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Now, he's obviously a large man. He's obviously in no situation where he's trying to physically resist what's going on. He's not being aggressive. He's not swinging out. There's just no reason for that level of force.
What happens if the officer doesn't lose his job? Now, the sidebar is the NYPD has its own prohibitions. It is not illegal to choke, and certainly the grand jury didn't find it illegal here, but it is against police procedure. They don't allow chokes. Do you think he was choking, or do you think that's grounds for his dismissal?
Well, I think it's clearly a chokehold, and there will be administrative proceedings brought against the officer. And
ongoing now.
They'll begin today, and there will probably, if they can't reach a resolution, there'll be an administrative trial where they'll try to determine whether he violated the regulations. Then it's up to Commissioner Bratton as to what.
What does the family want?
Well, I think the family wants justice. I don't think they want to see Officer Pantaleo continue as a police officer in New York City, given his history here. So,
and the issue of why the grand jury decided what it did, the lack of transparency in the process, a prosecutor investigating their own police officers, does the family want that to change?
Well, we've called in these cases in the past, and in this case as well, that there really should be an independent special prosecutor who handles these kind of issues.
And what was the reaction you got? Why was that denied?
Well, I don't know that it's actually at this, given the current state of New York law, that it's permitted, but it's certainly been something that people have pushed for over and over in these cases, and there's a good reason why, is that the prosecutor is so close and so connected and so intertwined with the police to make their cases that when they have to investigate their own, it becomes difficult.
As in the Ferguson situation, the idea that the prosecutor is going to use the grand jury as an impartial presenter of evidence, that's not how that tool is usually used. The prosecutor usually has a very heavy hand in shaping it, which is why defense attorneys like yourself don't want your clients in front of a grand jury. It seems to be different with cops. Do you think that is the truth?
I think the truth is out there. I mean, it's clearly true. In Ferguson and apparently here as well, they really use the grand jury process to try to get to the ultimate question of guilt, rather than whether there was reasonable cause or probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed. Any crime from the level of a simple assault to reckless endangerment to up to the level of murder. And if the players had been reversed, I think you would have had an indictment within 2 days.
If Eric Garner was the defendant against Officer Pantaleo for what he did to him.
Right, there's no question. There's no question that
wouldn't have had a grand jury. You think the prosecutor would have just charged him, right?
Well, no, there would have been a grand jury, but if it had been a serious crime. But that's a good point. They could have gone by way of information. They didn't have to go through the grand jury process, but they did. And I can understand that, but still, if you look at one of the troubling things that I learned yesterday was that all the officers other than Pantaleo were given immunity for their testimony. That really concerned me, because this was not just the case looking at the conduct of one police officer. If you watch the video, there's several officers engaged with Mr. Garner, on top of him, giving him the difficulty breathing. And
the homicide isn't just the choke, it's about chest compression.
In fact, the officer medical examiner said that the cause of death was a combination of neck compression and chest compression.
So that's another aspect we're going to have to look at in terms of whether or not this was the fair result. Jonathan Moore, thank you very much for bringing us the interview. Extend our sympathies to the family, and we'll look forward to continuing this conversation. We know the story doesn't end today.
No, it doesn't.
All right. A lot of other news, Mikhail.
Last hour, a woman has now been arrested in the brutal stabbing of that American teacher in Abu Dhabi. The suspect is a 30-year-old woman from the United Arab Emirates who also allegedly placed a bomb in front of a Muslim American doctor's home. That bomb, however, was defused in time. Meanwhile, the victim of the stabbing has been identified as American Ebola Ryan. She was killed in the bathroom of a mall. Officials in the UAE had warned American teachers about threats to their safety. 17 states now filing a federal lawsuit challenging the president's executive action on immigration. The suit claims the president is violating the Constitution. In the meantime, the House is preparing a vote on a Republican-backed bill to undo the president's action, although it's likely to go nowhere in the Senate. The bill is aimed at quieting House conservatives unhappy that GOP leaders backed away from a spending showdown over the issue. 3 more women have come forward now with claims they were sexually abused by Bill Cosby. The women were joined by attorney Gloria Allred, who said Cosby should consider waiving the statute of limitations or set up a $100 million fund for the alleged victims. In the meantime, Cosby's 2 shows scheduled this weekend in Tarrytown, New York, have been postponed in the wake of the nearly 24 allegations of sex abuse.
It's not that I defend Bill Cosby. It's that I just think this is about that $100 million. $100 million fund they should set up, huh? Waive the statute of limitations. Listen, we can't prosecute you, Bill, but we can embarrass you unless you pay $100 million. That sounds like extortion to me. Now, once again, I am not saying Bill Cosby did not do anything or did do anything. I do not know. I am saying Bill Cosby got money, and it seems that it is being targeted. And for the life of me, I don't see how, if it's 1 or 51 women saying that 30 years ago they were molested by Bill Cosby, why they wait 30 years and now they want money. So they can cry, but they on the news crying now 30 years later, 20 years later, 15 years. What they was doing for them 20 years, they wasn't crying for them 20 years. They just crying now, and they want money. $100 million fund. See, me, I just see some bullshit, and that's just me. And that's not saying I don't have sympathy for someone who's the victim of sexual assault. That doesn't have anything to do with this, and you can't cloud the issue like that. This is about $100 million. Statute of limitation, they know exists, so they know the man's not going to be charged. So they know this is about character assassination, economic terrorism. They are terrorizing Bill Cosby's economic prospects to earn a living as an entertainer in this country, or any other country for that matter. It's economic terrorism. Pay $100 million or we gonna press this issue. It's classic extortion.